desirable guys. So
Right.
signal a little bit of interest, be subtle, but just be there.
I think with the compliments, I mean, compliments are a great way to get a conversation going. However, you have to be careful about what you're complimenting.
Yeah.
Your first compliment should not be something of a sexual nature.
Right.
It comes off creepy.
It is creepy. Yeah. That is creepy.
It is very creepy. So, find other things to compliment her on that are not just based off of how she looks.
Right.
You see her at a coffee shop, she's reading a book, like, wow, that's a really interesting book. You must be really smart, or
right.
or something, dealing with intelligence or something like that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is after you have indicated or hinted that you're interested, when you get the notion that she's not interested, be confident, be respectful, and walk away. Get out of the situation.
But I totally see what this guy's saying, because the subtle and ambiguous world of flirting is inherently confusing, right? And it's unclear. And that's part of why it's fun and it's sexy and people don't get it. And so, like, I know for me, I didn't know that my wife had an inkling of a feeling for me. Until we had hung out for a solid week, literally 24 hours a day, splitting up just to literally go to sleep and come back to a coffee shop and hang out again. And a week in, I had no idea. We had almost functionally been dating for a week, and I still had no idea if she liked me. And so I finally just had to say it. I finally just said, okay, I have feelings for you. Is there anything there? And she was like, yeah, no, there is. And I was like, gee, thanks. Could have used any kind of hint.
Right, but do you think that's more of an issue with men and less of an issue with women? Because I can totally agree with that. I've been in those situations too, where I'm like, I don't know if there's going to be a second date. I don't know as if she's interested in me at all. And a good friend of mine kind of he kind of makes fun of me and teases me a bit and says, for being a therapist,
you're really bad at detecting.
You might be on the spectrum a bit, because I can't pick up on stuff like that when dating. But it's been my experience, and I'd be interested to hear other people's opinions on this, but it's been my experience. It has been my experience that women know. Like, they can pick up on really subtle things, and they're pretty attuned to, pretty sure this guy likes me. Yeah, I think that's what's going on. So the other part of my brain is kind of thinking, well, if it turns into a friend zone thing, is that just because she knows that this is happening but is not interested?
I think a percentage of the time it is. But what I hear in this writer is, and I've met guys like this, they're very friendly and they're very respectful of women, which is great. And so they end up having a lot of female friends. But their approach, they only have one trick in their bag. They only have one style. And so they approach as a friend almost always, and there is no signal of interest. And so if there was interest from the female side, she doesn't detect interest from him. As he said, he ends up friend-zoning them. So I think that he has to try on some new personality traits, things that he hasn't done before. He has to try on, like he mentions teasing. There's some value to that. That sounds silly and childish, but that kind of teasing, sort of prodding, giving them a hard time over something simple and having an engaging conversation like that, that can be flirtatious and is something that signals to them that you're interested. And I think that we both, the man and the woman, have to figure out how to signal these things without coming right out and saying it, because that is super awkward, because that's too much of a conversation too early, I think. And so he's asking how to flirt. It's a delicate art. I strongly encourage you to find a man in your life that you think does that pretty well and ask him to actually showcase this. Actually go out with him and ask him to show you how he does that, because honestly, this is something you learn, I think, socially by having friends that are guys and seeing how they did it and having conversations. And that's how you pick up the subtle and unspoken art of how to actually explain to somebody that you're interested in them without saying those really creepy words, which I totally did, Nick, and I got a wife out of it. So, take my advice. Do as I say, not as I do.
Jim is the anomaly.
I am the anomaly for many, many reasons. So good luck to you, sir, and I wish you many years of happiness. But definitely try to find somebody else to show you how to do this, because it's hard to do it over the radio. All right, so our next one is also another parenting question, and this comes from username Gator Dragon, and he writes, double potty training trouble. All right. I have 2 sons, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, who I have a bit of a problem with. The 3-year-old is easier for now, but his big brother was fairly calm and patient as a potty trainer, who always went when asked, and he figured out how his body felt before he went. The 3-year-old is an active toddler who gets more easily distracted by television and toys and running and climbing. He doesn't entirely mind or notice a wet pull-up and hasn't learned the signs of needing to go. Any tips for this very active and energetic 3-year-old? My second question is about the older 5-year-old who seems to have regressed and gone from having accidents every 2 or 3 weeks to having 2 accidents a week. Is this the result of his younger brother's potty training? Is it because of kindergarten itself? Is it a combination of both? How can I help my sons with this potty training trouble?
Okay. As a single man,
yes,
who's never had
dogs.
Kids,
Nick, how did you potty train your dogs?
I wouldn't recommend crate training.
The children?
I'll throw that out there right now. I think that's a bad idea. Well, I'm going to go get some coffee.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. So, okay, potty training and parenting stuff. I have a couple of little tips on this one. So for the 3-year-old, I hear him saying that he's using pull-ups. Actually, I advise you to go straight to undies and don't do pull-ups at all, because I think pull-ups cause a confusion because they're allowed to go potty in them, and so it feels too much like a diaper, but then they're sort of encouraged to mentally figure it out, whereas undies have an actual different feel, and yes, they're going to make a mess, yes, they're going to have accidents, but actually just go straight to the undies and dedicate a whole weekend to checking on this child every 20 minutes. And every 20 minutes just saying, hey, do you need to go potty? Let's go try. And so try to do that every 20 minutes during their waking hours. Put them in a diaper only when they're going to sleep, because they don't have any control over that consciously, but go straight to undies, check on them every 20 minutes. And since these are both boys, I'll give you another trick. Boys are generally harder to potty train than girls. Another trick is to go buy some Cheerios and to take the Cheerio and throw it in the toilet and then tell the boy to shoot it. And that is a lot of fun. I personally, this is what I do on my weekends, Nick. But this is a great way to train your son. So with my boy, I would throw those in there and tell him, hey, get it. And he'd just like, yeah. And so he'd really look forward to it. And then he doesn't want to miss that game. And so he's always looking forward to going potty because he wants to go shoot the Cheerio. And then you could also give them a candy afterward and say, oh, good job. And give him one M&M and say, you went potty, yay, and give him an M&M. For the older kid, also I would encourage you, if he's not in undies right now going to kindergarten, make sure he is. Pull-ups are a bad decision. You're going to need some teacher help on that one. I would encourage you to actually talk to the teacher and ask, hey, between transitioning from activity to activity during the day, can you check? Can you tell him, hey, time to go potty? Do you need to go potty? But he's got to sort of mentally come to it. With both of these boys, I would encourage you to make sure they're wearing undies, not pull-ups, and just dive into it deep. Let the accidents happen. Send them with extra clothes, and just step into it. And with the little one, do Cheerios, but definitely don't send Cheerios with the older one to school, because that will be creepy when he dumps a bowl of Cheerios into the potty in the middle of kindergarten class. Not a good choice.
Right. And if that all fails and you have to go to crate training, just be sure to take them outside right after letting them out of the crate. Teach them to go to the door.
Yeah. When putting your child back in his cage, make sure that there's fresh newspaper. Okay. Don't be inhumane.
And treats are your best friend.
Treats. Treats, and take him for a walk. I want to give Nick special props for taking questions today on parenting, though he is not a parent. But you've been a foster dad, and you've worked with kids and teenagers a lot.
Yeah, mostly teenagers.
Okay.
The 2 boys that I ended up fostering were both 17-year-olds. So
okay.
They had been potty trained for a couple of years at that point.
Months before you met them.
Yeah,
so today's questioners being a baby and a toddler is probably a little outside of your range.
Yeah.
That's okay. So these all the things we've talked about today apply to teenagers.
I apologize, everybody. This has been a very gym-heavy episode.
Yes. It's better than ever. Doesn't it feel like it's great? And Jay-Z.
So, those of you who are not interested, tune in next week.
When we'll have less Jim and more anybody else. All right. So the next question I'm going to read, and Nick, I think this is one that you can actually jump on. So let's start with this one. This one's anonymous, and it writes, I want to go back to therapy, but I feel like they will throw me in a mental hospital if I say the wrong thing.
How did we miss this one when we were talking about the stigma of mental health?
Oh, yeah. That would have been perfect. Yeah.
Well, we're too deep into this episode right now to.
We just gotta unpack it.
We can't fix that.
But this is a fair question, Nick.
It's a
lot of
great
people
question.
are scared, because they think, well, what if I tell you I want to hurt myself? Are you gonna put me in a straitjacket and send me up the river?
Right. So ultimately, no, that's not really going to happen. I mean, the thing that as a therapist that we would look out for is, are you a threat to yourself or someone else?
Right.
Even things that have happened in the past, you're still protected by patient confidentiality.
Right.
We're really only bound to break confidentiality to prevent a future incident.
Right.
If you go into therapy and you say, I'm going to, when I leave this session, I'm going to go kill my wife.
Right.
Yeah, that's going to
We're going to do something
reported.
about that.
Absolutely.
For them
We've got
and
a duty
for you.
to warn.
Yeah, you've come to us so you don't ruin your life. We want to help you not do that. In those situations, we'll protect you by getting some help. Right.
And if you're threatening, or I don't want to say even threatening, but if you're having suicidal thoughts, I know a lot of people who just don't want to talk about that in therapy because they feel like, well, if I tell my therapist that I'm having these thoughts, they're going to put me in a straitjacket and I'm going to be in the psych ward. And that's not necessarily the case. There's
very rarely the case.
Therapists are trained to evaluate suicidal threats, suicidal ideation, to assess the risk involved with any of those incidents. Based off of that, there have been times where further help is needed, further assistance. I mean, if you really are a serious threat to yourself, you have voiced that you want to kill yourself, you have a plan, you've got the means in which to do it, and you're set that this is going to happen tonight, then I, as a helping professional, am going to have to do whatever I can to make sure that you are safe, and that's not going to happen. For the most part, though, I'm trying to think of a time that I've had to do that against somebody's will, and it's very unlikely.
Rare.
Yeah,
it's so rare.
Very
and
rare.
This, again, it goes back to some of the stereotypes of therapists, and people think that we're all just pointing at people and giving them labels or sending them, into a straitjacket. That is not how it is. It is not Batman. There's not Arkham Asylum, and, that's not how this works.
Right.
I have, in Nevada, we call it Legal 2000, and Legal 2000 is when somebody is beyond their own ability to care for themselves, and so we're going to make them go to a hospital for about 72 hours to ensure that they're safe and that the community is safe too. In all of my career, I have probably Legal 2000, I want to say 2 people. One person was actively psychotic and could not differentiate reality from the dream world. That person needed help right then. And the other person let me know they are suicidal, they are gonna hurt themselves, and asked for help. And I didn't do it without their permission. I sat them down and said, let's call together and let's tell them what's going on. And he said, yes, I need this. And we got help together. So, guys, there's a stereotype out there that we're gonna secretly conspire against you. Therapists would not be very successful if we did everything without you. We want to talk to you and find out what you're going through, and then with your consent and support, come to conclusions together, not behind your back.
Yeah, and that's even good for the therapist. I mean, ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to empower the people that we work with. If I'm working with somebody and they don't feel safe, then I want them to be involved in that decision making. And what an amazing step that is for the person to be able to identify, I'm not safe, I need help, and I'm willing to do this.
I think one of the highest values a therapist has is what we call patient sovereignty, right, Nick? The patient's ability to decide their own fate for themselves. And we see ourselves as a consultant, as a helper, as a guide, not as the driver of your car, as a passenger in your car who's holding a map and trying to help you navigate. So I don't think you ever have to be afraid that if you come talk to a therapist, we're going to lock you away or anything like that. You'd be surprised what we've heard, and you'd be surprised, what we're comfortable listening to. And if we're concerned, we'll tell you, but we'll never do that without your consent and your understanding of what's happening.
So if I'm a patient of yours, Jim, and I go into our therapy session and I tell you that I've been hearing voices.
Right.
does that mean you're going to put me in the psych
Absolutely not.
hospital?
Absolutely not. We're going to talk about how normal that is. We're going to talk about other symptoms. I'm going to try to find out if there's more going on. And I'm usually going to give you a referral. I'm going to say, hey, you don't have to live with these symptoms. So what you're experiencing is actually best treated with a certain kind of medicine. Let me give you a referral back to your primary doctor. I want you to show him this letter that I'm writing that explains all this, and let's start having a conversation about medicine. So even in that kind of case where there's something pretty serious going on, we're not going to be locking you away. The only time, again, that I've ever done this is whenever somebody told me they're going to hurt themselves.
Right.
That needed to be addressed right then. And they were comfortable with that. I didn't do it without their permission. So it's very, very common for us to